If you've an ounce of Scottish blood, or Scotland in your distant heritage, then listen on. Today I'll continue to read a story from the Introducing Mr. B books. They were written to help children understand and enjoy Robert Burns' poems. This month's story is Two Mountain Bikers. It was inspired by Robert Burns' poem, The Twa Dogs.
Caesar. It was a terrible name to have. Kids made puns of it, saying, "Seize her!" or they stuck their arm in the air. "All hail Caesar!" He was used to it now, and luckily he was bigger than most boys his age, and stronger, so when he told them to lay off, they did. Caesar had to learn to be strong early in life, when his mother and father's fishing boat sank off the coast of Newfoundland, and they drowned. His uncle, who lived in Coylesfield Mansion House in Ayrshire, adopted Caesar. There wasn't anything his uncle wouldn't do for Caesar, and when he asked for a mountain bike, his uncle bought a top-of-the-line bike. It had front and rear shocks, a full range of gears, and a frame made from lightweight titanium. To make sure it didn't get lost or stolen, his uncle had engraved identification marks on the frame, and a GPS tracking chip attached. Because Caesar was self-conscious about his name, it was almost automatic that he was drawn to become friends with another boy at school with an equally unusual name. His name was Louis, and while he was smaller than Caesar, he was wiry and strong from working on his father's farm. When Caesar asked him where his name came from, he said his father told him he had heard the name in a song and thought it sounded unique. One afternoon, using his iPhone, Caesar texted Louis and asked if he could join him on a bike ride. Louis replied saying that he had to do some work on the farm, but he would be finished in 2 hours. Caesar confirmed, saying, "See you then." It was a great day to go biking. It was sunny, and there was a gentle breeze to help keep them cool. Louis' bike, which he had bought second-hand, wasn't as fancy as Caesar's, but they both wore the same safety helmets. "Where are we going?" Louis asked. "How about up to the dam?" Caesar said. "Oh, that's a long way." "You can't do it?" "Yeah, I can be there before you." Louis pushed down on his bike's pedals, and gravel shot out behind the rear wheel. "Catch me if you can," he called over his shoulder. "No problem," shouted Caesar, and the chase was on. It was uphill all the way to the dam. Not a steep hill, but definitely without any sections to rest. The first part of the trail was a gravel road, and the boys raced along, confident they wouldn't have to look out for any cars or tractors. There was a stone wall alongside the road, and when Louis skidded to a halt, it was beside a gate in the wall. Quickly he jumped off the bike, pushed the gate open, and went into a field. He tried to close the gate before Caesar arrived, but he barged through, leaving Louis to secure the gate. Caesar was now in the lead, going as fast as he could across a track in a grassy field, with Louis in hot pursuit. Rabbit sprang up from the grass and scampered away, and Caesar should have thought about rabbit burrows, but he didn't. He looked over his shoulder to see if Louis was near, and at the same instant his front wheel twisted when it caught in a rabbit hole. Caesar flew over the handlebars and landed on the ground with a thump. Louis slowed to see if his friend was okay, and when he saw him starting to get back on his bike, he knew it was time to get going. At the far side of the field there was a forest. It was one of the new plantations, where all the trees were planted in straight rows. A path led around the outside, but Louis got off his bike and lifted it over a barbed wire fence meant to keep people out. He wasn't the first to have done this. There was an unofficial trail made by other mountain bikers that went through the trees. Caesar caught up with Louis, and the two of them went almost side by side, with branches from some trees whipping their faces and legs. Still they pushed as fast as they could, because they knew that just ahead there was a stream with a single felled tree over it to provide a crossing. The boys jostled for the lead. They could now see the stream, and neither boy was backing off. With a final surge, Caesar's front wheel edged ahead of Lewis, and with reckless courage, Caesar bounced straight onto the log. Lewis swerved and fell off his bike. Caesar concentrated on keeping his bike on the log, and when he got to the other side, he stopped and laughed. Lewis knew it was going to be almost impossible to catch Caesar now. But an idea started in his head. Carefully he crossed the log and cycled hard to close the gap with Caesar as much as possible. They had to climb another fence to leave the forest, and then ride a track to the dam. Caesar was on his way down this, when Lewis was just over the fence. He knew it was a little crazy, but he had seen other boys doing it, and instead of following Caesar, Lewis cycled straight to the edge of a rocky embankment that surrounded the dam. Lewis crossed his fingers and started jumping his bike down the rocks, one jump at a time. He could see Caesar on the path in the distance. Straight down the rocks Lewis came, and with each successful jump he became more confident. Now Caesar could see what Lewis was doing. He knew that if Lewis didn't fall, there was no way he could beat him to the dam. Caesar stopped and watched Lewis make the last two jumps, and he was down at the dam. Caesar waved and applauded, then slowly cycled up to join Lewis, who was lying on the grass. Caesar got off his bike and lay down near Lewis. They were both sweating and panting hard. Eventually they sat up and drank some water from their bottles. "That was really crazy to come down those rocks," Caesar said. "Yeah, I don't know what got into me, but I'm glad I'm here in one piece. It was really scary," Lewis said. "I can't imagine what my Uncle Christopher would have said if I did that. He lives such a safe life in the big mansion house." "It must be really different for you, Lewis. My uncle has a lot of people doing all the hard work for him. He has a cook, gardeners, and can you believe he doesn't even have to drive his car? He has a chauffeur," Caesar said. "Well, that's certainly different from our home," Lewis said. "My father works hard each day. If he's not ploughing fields, then he cuts stones in the quarry for building walls around the farmers' fields. He gets just enough money to pay the farm rent, food, clothes, and necessities for our family. One time when my father was sick and couldn't go to work, I heard my mother tell him that we wouldn't have much money left to buy food once they paid the rent to your uncle. But they managed, with help from friends, till he got well again. You know, normally our family is happy and content. Whatever plain food my mother makes must be good for us, because my brothers are strong. And my sisters are really clever. I bet my Uncle Christopher would be surprised to know that. The people that come to the mansion house are very snobby, and avoid being with working people, almost like you and I stay away from doing homework. Some of the people that work for my uncle are terrible hypocrites. I was sitting in the room one day when a man who collected rents from the farmers was talking to him. Oh, he ranted and called such names of the farmers who couldn't pay. I think it must be terrible to be a working man, Caesar said. Lewis smiled. Well, if money was the only thing that made life fun, you might be right. But most working people I know don't mind doing their job. It lets them get the things they really need. Usually they've worked so hard, sometimes just getting a rest feels like a luxury. Trust me, Caesar, you don't need lots of money to have fun. You should come to our house at Halloween. We all get dressed up and have parties with singing and dancing. We go trick-or-treating and get lots of sweets and fruit. When the children come to our house, they have to dunk for apples, or they have to try and take a bite from a swinging scone that my mother baked and dipped in treacle. It's great fun. You should be able to hear at your mansion house the noise my sisters make when they squeal and my brothers shout and cheer. Or another good time at our house is New Year's Day. It's usually cold, and my father needs to keep the fire blazing to make sure the house is warm and inviting. As evening comes, groups of friends and neighbors come around, and each brings part of the meal, and then we all sit down to a grand dinner. After, when our stomachs are full, My grandparents sit by the fire talking and joking, while we run around the house playing games. Even the dog joins in barking. Later, the adults start dancing and singing. I really love these nights. We have parties at our house, but there isn't any singing or dancing. My uncle friends come dressed very fashionably and spend the night just talking and eating dinner, Caesar said. If children come, they're usually sent to the entertainment room in the basement to watch movies or play video games. Like you, I really enjoy New Year. My uncle's a good skier, and he takes me to Aviemore to ski. I don't think my parents could ever afford that. Your uncle and his friends must be really happy with all the money they have, Lewis said. I'm not so sure. They never have to worry about being hungry or cold. But our house is full of security systems. Floodlights and cameras cover the outside, and in the house all the doors and windows have alarms, so this must be a worry for them. They spend an awful lot of time discussing how to invest the money they have. When things they can't control go wrong, this seems to cause them lots of anguish. Not everyone is like this, but unfortunately lots of them are, Caesar said. They had made a late start since Lewis had to work on the farm, and now the sun was starting to set. Fortunately, they knew there would be a long twilight period before it got dark. Buzzing bees made their last flight back to the hives, and cows settled down on the grass. Caesar and Lewis got up and on to their bikes. "Downhill all the way," they said, and took off in the same headlong dash. When they reached the gravel track, they waved goodbye and went their separate ways home.